Hello everyone, this is Mitch, and welcome to episode 8 of our Let's Play Kerbal Space program. So this is the aftermath of our Minmus mission. As you can see, we have almost 1,300 science points, and 1,100,000 space bucks or whatever monies. And, well, we have visited Minmus, we have visited the Mun, and now it's time to go interplanetary. That's right. So we'll visit the tracking station for a moment, because I have a few things I want to explain. So, going interplanetary, we have a fair number of choices. If we zoom out, these are all options. We could go to Elu, we could go to Jewel, we could go to Drace, we could go to Duna, we could go to Eve, we could go to Moho. But we're still on early science, and we're still early in the Let's Play. So the real decision is between a few closer planets. And for a manned mission, because we really don't have access to the more powerful antennas yet, so sending probes is not a great option so far. So what are our options? We are on Kerbin, and a very accessible planet could be Eve. However, Eve has a bit of a challenge to it, and that's, if you look at the planetary characteristics here, you can see at surface level gravity 1.7 and whatever G's. This is 1.7 times the gravity present on Kerbin. This is a lot. Also, there is an atmosphere. It's 20 kilometers higher than Kerbin's, and it's 5 times as dense. Yeah. So Eve is not really an option, actually. It's more of a, endgame achievement type of thing. Sending something on the surface of Eve and sending it back up into space and returning. Eve return missions are, they're difficult. So we're probably going to save that for last. And Gilly, we could visit Gilly, but, it's Gilly. It's the smallest thing in Kerbal Space Program, as far as I know. It's tiny. It's a rock around Eve. Not very interesting. So, what other choices do we have? We could go to Duna. Duna is not too hard to reach, and if we look at the stats here, it's actually got a third of the gravity of Kerbin, which is actually pretty decent. It's not too hard to get an encounter with it, and it's not too hard to land and to take off again and to get back into orbit. So, not a bad choice. It's got a bit of an atmosphere. It's marginal, it's tiny, really. It's just a little bit more than a 20th of what's on Kerbin. So it's tiny. And there's Ike, which is kind of nice. But that means that if we go to Duna, to make a single mission around Duna and Ike, we'd need to go to Duna and Ike, which complicates things a little bit. And Duna, it's fairly interesting. I want to make a more ambitious mission there. So for a first mission, maybe not the best. Although for you it could be perfectly fine, but for my goals with this Let's Play, And here is a planet that is often shunned or rejected or forgotten or whatever by a lot of Kerbal Space players, and that is Drace. Drace is very similar to the Mun. but it's on an inclined orbit, and it's of course much further out than the Mun. So if we look here, this is Drace, the brownish beige orbit line. And as you can see, even if we make a straight line with Duna, Kerbin, Eve, you know, Drace is very much inclined. So it's a little bit harder to reach. However, there's nothing around Drace. There's no atmosphere, there are no natural satellites, no moons. It's just Drace and asteroids, but we don't have the tracking station for asteroids so far, so we can't see them. So I'm thinking Drace is our first interplanetary target. That's right. And it's got roughly a 10th or an 11th, or, well, not an 11th, but it's got 0.11 Gs compared to Kerbin, so it's quite easy to land on and lift back off and to get back. Now, we're going to spend our juicy science points from Minmus. So first one is aviation for this tank that I'm looking at right now. It's only liquid fuel. I'm going to explain why I want this particular fuel tank. We are going to take electronics because we're going to land on a faraway body. Might as well get the accelerometer because to use this you need to be landed on the surface of whatever you want to get a reading from. And it's getting us better antennas. It's not quite enough for long-range probes. It could work, but it's going to require several antennas to get a really strong signal out there. But it could be done. We are going to get advanced flight control for the better reaction wheel here, and the monopropellant RCS, that type of stuff. We get a better landing can, but we're not going to use it yet. Then I'm going to get the heavier rocketry for the mainsail, the twin bore, advanced fuel systems for better fuel tanks, and that unlocks the Nerve nuclear engine. And this is why I wanted a dedicated fuel tank, because this thing only consumes liquid fuel. Here you can see there's no oxidizer, just liquid fuel, and it's got an 800 ISP in vacuum, which is not the best actually. The ion engines are better, but for the usable thrust, maximum thrust, this is great. So we're gonna get that. We're gonna get that, I said. All right. And we are going to get this node for the Clampotron docking port and the Airstream protective shell and all kinds of goodies, but mostly for the docking port. And we're down to 76 points of science, which means we're pretty much done here for now. Now, I actually cheated a little bit in the sense that I've already built some vehicles to go interplanetary. Because, with our current, let me go back, with our current Kerbal Space Center, it's going to be difficult to launch a very large rocket. Currently our launch pad has a limit of 140 tons, and the maximum vessel size is actually relevant. And well, given our, you know, science tree, what it looks like, it's actually going to be a fairly complicated mission. So I'm not going to show you the building of everything, but I'm going to explain the logic behind every vehicle I did build. So here we have our Kerbollo in a Mark II version. So what's different about a Mark II? Well, I changed the Terrier engines for Sparks. Here we can see Spark is 0.1 ton. has a max thrust in vacuum of 20 kilonewtons. Terrier, 60 kilonewtons, but 0.5 tons, meaning I get the same amount of thrust with 3 of these as I do with 1 of these, but it's not as heavy. It's 0.1 tons, so 3 times is 0.3 tons. This one is 0.5. So we save a little bit of weight. I also removed the nose cones because now it's in a protected shell, a fairing. So it's not exposed to the airstream when we launch this thing. So we don't need the aerodynamics. So I replaced this with an extra fuel tank. And you're going to notice I disabled the fuel usage in the fuel tanks. And I reduced the amount of fuel, because this thing is now attached via a docking port to a launch vehicle. And I also put photovoltaic panels that cannot be retracted because we're not going to get them back anyway. I added small monopropellant tanks because this thing is actually going to dock. Also, I added the accelerometer here to get extra science. And what else was there? Accelerometer, this, the monopropellant, well, of course, the RCS thruster block, which, if we look at the center of mass, well, if we decouple the thing, is roughly in line with the center of mass, so this thing can dock with relative ease. And we have a launch vehicle. Now I cheated a little bit in the sense that I offset the inline stabilizer wheel into a probe core. So I hid the probe core because it would be ugly otherwise. But there is a probe core on this with batteries and chutes and yeah, a reaction wheel. So this thing can actually go into space, put our faithful Kerbollo lander in orbit, and actually deorbit itself and land and be recoverable for most part. I mean, the solid fuel boosters are not recoverable, but the core here is. So that's actually nice. It saves us a bit of money in case we want to send more Kerbollos like this in orbit. So that's it for this one. Oh, actually, very important, the delta V readings. We're going to remove this, put it further away, it doesn't matter. So, if we enable fuel consumption, and we max the fuel tanks, and we put it in vacuum, we have roughly 2,350 meters per second of delta V, which is enough to land on Drace 3 times, and, well, not 3 times actually, to land on Drace, take off, land again, and take off for Kerbin, basically. And actually it's got a little bit more because I'm going to take out the monopropellant, well, most of the monopropellant, before leaving for Drace. So that gives us actually 2,550 meters per second of delta V, which is absolutely great. But this is actually not enough to take us to Drace. Here is the launch window planner. Oops, doesn't matter, I just need to not save the changes. Now, I'm a little bit, I'm not doing things to maximum efficiency. I want to get to Drace. Oops. Actually, let's do this again. I hit the reset button accidentally. 400 days. And I want to go there before half of year 2 or so. So from Kerbin to Drace, latest departure year 2, day 297. And time of flight between 300 and 400 days. Plot it. And there we go. So, in order to get from Kerbin to Drace, using this faster encounter, we're going to need extra fuel. It's actually close to twice the amount of fuel you would normally need to go to Dre's. But it's also going to be faster. So this is, more than this lander has. And that's not even counting the landing on Dre's and taking off and landing and returning to Kerbin. So my solution for this, don't save, lies with this. We have the same launch system, but we have this thing. What is this? This is a nerve engine, and we are going to mess around with it a little bit. We're going to change the root part to this, and we're going to remove this. And we're going to get the delta V readings. So if I enable the tanks, if I fill them, well, it's hard to tell because right now there's no payload at the top, but I did calculate it with a Kerbollo on top, a fueled Kerbollo on top, and this is roughly supposed to be 4,500 meters of delta V or so. We could actually try, don't save, Kerbollo merge, no, hold on. Did I just save? I think I just saved. I did. Let's put this thing back. Alright. Now we can save. And actually, we don't want it to be fueled because otherwise it's too heavy to actually reach orbit. So reduce the fuel. I'm locking this because again we have decouplers, and very important, you need to push this button once to enable crossfeed. Right now if I push again it's going to disable it because we're going to dock with this thing and we're going to want to refuel this module obviously, but at the same time we don't want this fuel to get used by the launch stage. We don't want it to flow through the decoupler, the docking port, and for this reason I'm locking it. Now it's not filled, it's not, it's not going to be critical that this is not getting used, but it's better if it's the way it is. Because right now, if we look, launch vehicle just barely gets to orbit and goes back down, basically. So, yeah, we can save and continue. Kerbollo Mk II. Load. Let's see. I am going to reroute this to this, and I'm going to call it Kerbollo Mk II Lander. Save. Now I can open the KITM, the Kerbollo Interplanetary Transfer Module. And remove this. Don't save. I can merge with the lander, flip it, and put it on top. There we go. Now if we fuel this thing, where's the engine? Let's move the engine down. And if we fuel this, very important, there we go. So we can see we're going to get actually 4,676 meters per second of delta V for the whole lander. That's even with the monopropellant. So this is going to carry us all the way to the race, and it's then going to be discarded. And we're only going to use the lander to actually land and come back to Kerbin. So, don't save. So we have the Kerbollo Mk II. Let's just make sure I didn't screw everything up. Which gets into orbit by way of this launch vehicle. The Kerbollo Mk II launcher. I actually made a dedicated craft file just for the launcher. I think it can lift, from memory, about 19 tons to low Kerbin orbit, which is great. And finally, we are going to put this thing, the orbital KITM fuel tank module series. Sorry, that's kind of a mouthful and kind of uninspired, actually. It's basically a fuel tank that's going to be left in orbit of Kerbin, but this one is actually fueled enough to compensate for what is missing in the Kerbollo launcher. So we have a dedicated launch vehicle just for this one because it's very, very heavy. Actually, it's right on the limit of what we are allowed to do. So this thing is going to be put in low Kerbin orbit. Then I am going to launch also the Kerbollo, the KITM module. I'm going to dock the Kerbollo with the KITM. And then I'm going to dock the whole thing with this fuel tank. I'm going to transfer the fuel into the KITM and the Kerbollo lander. And then it's gonna fly to the race. Simple, right? Anyways, and this could be used for future missions, interplanetary missions. I may also expand it since it's going to have 2 docking ports. I could expand it into a dedicated space station in low Kerbin orbit, or just leave it as is as a fuel depot in space and reuse it in the future, refuel it and reuse it. So this thing has a probe core in a service bay along with a small battery, set of solar panels, an antenna, and a reaction wheel. All of this keeps it fueled with electricity and signal and RCS for basically SAS. So when I dock with it, if I bump it or whatever, it's not going to start spinning out of control. And we have a near empty RCS fuel tank. Basically, this is to empty the Kerbollo lander into this and perhaps refuel the monopropellant of future vehicles that are going to dock with this. And so that's the plan to go to the race. So if we look again, our departure is actually fairly soon. We are on day 297, I think, from memory. And this is on day 417, so it's in roughly 120 days. So that's really good, and we get there in exactly 400 days. Of course, we need to get back from the race, which is also going to take time, but that's roughly it. So these are the preparations for going to Drace, our first interplanetary missions. So I am actually going to... Do I make a docking episode where I do everything? I don't think that would be very interesting to watch. However, yeah, I think I'm going to make a capsule dedicated to docking because that's going to be very crucial to this mission. But I don't think you need to see me docking these specific modules for the purpose of this Let's Play. It's doable. I've tried it in a separate save. Of course, again, let's go back to the Kerbollo. The Kerbollo itself, its RCS is balanced. It's going to be very easy to dock it with the KITM, the transfer module. But once you consider that the KITM is going to be docked with the Kerbollo, the center of mass is going to be pulled much further down near the KITM, which means that the RCS is going to induce movements on the attitude. It's not just going to translate sideways. It's not going to go in a perfect line. So you need to account for that. But it's not actually that hard. I'm going to show you in the dedicated docking tutorial, but I know this is doable and it's not that tricky. And then once you've docked the thing with the fuel depot, you're set. You don't need to redock it. You don't need to move this thing. You just undock it again, and you're off to the race. So that's it. If that helped you, if you've enjoyed, please like and subscribe. Comments and feedback in the questions, because you might have some after this episode, in the sections below. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.